Listen to me, old man. I make one call and you disappear. You know, folks, I've been sitting on this bench for 40 years. 40 years, that's longer than most of you have been alive. I've seen mothers cry. I've seen fathers break down. I've seen young men and women who made one mistake, one terrible decision, and it cost them everything. And through all of it, through every single case that's come before me, I've held on to one fundamental belief that the courtroom is sacred ground. This isn't just a room with wooden benches and a flag on the wall. This is where civilization makes its stand. This is where we say collectively as a society that there are rules, there are consequences, and there are lines that cannot be crossed. But every once in a while, and I thank God, it's not often someone walks through those doors who doesn't understand that. Someone who thinks that power or money or family connections put them above the law. Someone who looks at this bench, looks at me, looks at everything this courtroom represents, and they laugh. They actually laugh. And when that happens, when someone shows that level of contempt for our justice system, that's when I have to remind them and everyone watching what real power looks like. Not the power that comes from a last name or a bank account. The power that comes from the people delegated to this court to maintain order and deliver justice. Today is one of those days. Let me tell you about the young man standing before me right now. His name is Diego Alejandro Salazar Ortega. He's 26 years old. His address, according to the paperwork in front of me, and I'm reading this directly from the intake form. His address is listed as currently residing at the Four Seasons Hotel Presidential Suite. Not an apartment, not a house, a hotel suite, the Presidential Suite. That tells you something right there, doesn't it? This isn't someone passing through town on business. This is someone who chooses to live in a $8,000 per night hotel room because he can, because money to him is meaningless. Now, I look at young Mr. Salazar Ortega standing there in his custom Italian suit. And yes, I know it's custom because I can see the silk lining when he moves. I can see the hand-stitched buttonholes. I've been doing this long enough to recognize real craftsmanship. And I see someone who has never been told no in his entire life. I see someone whose family name opens doors, whose phone calls get returned immediately, whose problems up until this very moment have always been solved with a wire transfer or a conversation with the right people. But here's what Mr. Salazar Ortega is about to learn. I don't care who your family is. I don't care how many businesses they own, how many politicians they've funded, or what kind of empire they've built. In this courtroom, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is what you did and whether you take responsibility for it. So let me tell everyone what brings us here today. Let me read from the police report filed by Officer Michael Patterson, badge number 47221, who's been serving this community with honor for 16 years. According to his account, and we also have dash cam footage and body cam footage, which we'll get to in a moment. On Saturday, November 11th at approximately 2:47 in the morning, Officer Patterson observed a black Lamborghini Aventador license plate reading untouchable, in case anyone's wondering about the creative spelling, traveling northbound on Riverside Drive at an estimated speed of 104 miles per hour in a posted 35 miles per hour zone. Let me repeat that for everyone in this courtroom. 104 miles per hour in a 35 zone at almost 3 in the morning. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Judge, at least the roads were empty at that hour. Were they? Were they really? Because according to this report, Officer Patterson had just cleared an accident scene 2 blocks south. An accident scene, which means there were emergency vehicles in the area, tow trucks, ambulances, people doing their jobs, trying to help someone who'd already been in a crash that night. And here comes Mr. Salazar Ortega flying through a residential neighborhood at triple-digit speeds in a car that costs more than most people's houses. Do you know what happens to a human body when it gets hit by a vehicle traveling at 180 miles per hour? I'll tell you, it doesn't matter if they're in a crosswalk or not. It doesn't matter if they're following every traffic law perfectly. Physics doesn't care about who's right and who's wrong. That person dies instantly. And the family, the mother, the father, the children, they don't get a trial. They don't get an appeal. They don't get their loved one back ever. But we got lucky that night, didn't we, Mr. Salazar Ortega? We got lucky because Officer Patterson's reflexes are sharp. He immediately activated his lights and siren and pursued the vehicle. And according to his report, it took nearly 2 miles, 2 full miles before that Lamborghini pulled over. 2 miles of residential streets, 2 miles of Officer Patterson, not knowing if this was a drunk driver, a stolen vehicle, or someone running from something worse. When the vehicle finally stopped in the parking lot of the shuttered Morrison Elementary School on Talbot Avenue, Officer Patterson approached the driver's side window following standard protocol. And here's what he found. Mr. Salazar Ortega behind the wheel, and I'm quoting directly from the report now, appeared agitated, refused to lower window more than 2 in, and immediately began speaking rapidly in Spanish and English, stating that the officer had made a mistake. A mistake. Officer Patterson made a mistake by pulling over someone doing 104 in a 35. That's an interesting perspective. Now, Officer Patterson, being the professional that he is, asked for license, registration, and proof of insurance. Standard request, the kind of thing that happens thousands of times every day in this country. And according to his testimony, which we have on body camera footage, crystal clear footage I might add, Mr. Salazar Ortega didn't hand over his documents. Instead, he made a phone call right there, with the officer standing at his window, pulled out a cell phone and started making a call. Officer Patterson asked him to hang up the phone and produce his documents 3 times, 3 separate times. You can hear it on the recording. Sir, I need you to end the call and provide your license. Professional, calm, by the book. And Mr. Salazar Ortega, he held up one finger, the universal sign for wait a minute, held up one finger to a law enforcement officer during a traffic stop, as if Officer Patterson was a waiter interrupting his dinner conversation. Let me paint this picture more clearly for everyone. It's almost 3:00 in the morning. Officer Patterson is standing on the side of a road in the dark next to a vehicle operated by someone who is just driving recklessly enough to kill someone. He doesn't know if there are weapons in that car. He doesn't know if the driver's impaired. He doesn't know if this person has a warrant or if they're about to flee again or if they're calling for backup of their own. Every traffic stop is potentially deadly for law enforcement, every single one. Officer Patterson has a wife and 2 daughters waiting for him at home. He has a right to go home safely at the end of his shift. And he's being told to wait while some spoiled rich kid finishes his phone call. But it gets worse. Oh, it gets so much worse. And this is where we transition from a serious traffic violation to something that makes my blood boil, because when Officer Patterson, after the 3rd request after exercising restraint, that honestly amazes me, when he finally informed Mr. Salazar Ortega that he needed to exit the vehicle, you know what happened. Mr. Salazar Ortega ended his phone call, lowered his window about 4 more inches, and said something. Something that Officer Patterson put in his report, something that was captured on body camera, something that I've now watched and listened to 17 times because I wanted to make absolutely certain I heard it correctly. He looked at Officer Patterson, this public servant who was simply doing his job, protecting our community, enforcing laws that exist to keep people alive. And Mr. Salazar Ortega said, and I quote, "I make one call and you disappear. I make one call and you disappear." Let that sink in for a moment. Let everyone in this courtroom, everyone who might hear about this case, let them really think about what that means. This wasn't a moment of anger. This wasn't someone losing their temper and saying something they regret. This was a threat, a calculated, deliberate threat made to a police officer. A threat that that explicitly stated that this defendant has the power through one phone call to make a law enforcement officer disappear. Now, in my 40 years on this bench, I've heard a lot of threats. I've heard people threaten witnesses. I've heard people threaten lawyers. I've had people threaten me. But there's something particularly chilling about this one because Mr. Salazar Ortega wasn't making an idle threat. He wasn't saying he'd beat someone up or key their car or leave a bad review online. He was suggesting something far more sinister. He was suggesting that he, or more accurately, his family, has the kind of power that can make problems disappear, the kind of power that operates outside the law, the kind of power that, frankly, is the reason we have courtrooms in the first place. Do you know what Officer Patterson did in response? I'll tell you what he did because it's in the report and on the video. He stayed calm. His voice didn't shake. He didn't get aggressive. He said, "Sir, step out of the vehicle now," or I will add failure to comply to your charges. That's it. Professional, controlled, exactly what we train our officers to do, even when someone is threatening their life. And Mr. Salazar Ortega, he laughed. You can hear it on the body camera audio. A short, dismissive laugh. Then he got out of the car finally. And do you know what he did? He left the engine running, left the driver's door open, walked around to the passenger side, opened that door, and retrieved what Officer Patterson initially feared might be a weapon, but turned out to be a leather wallet, a Hermes wallet for anyone keeping track of the details. From that wallet, Mr. Salazar Ortega produced a Mexican driver's license, which, by the way, is not valid for operating a vehicle in this state without an accompanying international driving permit, which he did not have, and a credit card. Not a registration, not proof of insurance. A credit card, a Black American Express card, which he held up and said, "How much? How much?" As if Officer Patterson was running a toll booth, as if justice has a price tag and it can be swiped away with enough credit limit. Officer Patterson, showing more patience than this defendant deserved, explained that he couldn't accept payment, that Mr. Salazar Ortega was being cited for reckless driving, excessive speed, and threatening a peace officer, and that he needed to sign the citation. And here's where things escalated even further. Mr. Salazar Ortega refused to sign, stated, "Again, this is on camera. I don't sign things I haven't reviewed with my attorney." As if a traffic citation is a merger agreement, as if his constitutional rights are being violated by being asked to acknowledge receipt of a ticket. Officer Patterson explained very clearly that signing the citation is not an admission of guilt. It's simply a promise to appear in court. Standard procedure happens 1,000 times a day. And Mr. Salazar Ortega's response. He got back in his Lamborghini, engine still running, started to close the door, at which point Officer Patterson had no choice whatsoever, but to open the door and inform him that he was under arrest for failure to comply with the lawful order. And that's when the second phone call happened. Mr. Salazar Ortega, now being informed he's under arrest, makes another call right there, while Officer Patterson is trying to handcuff him for everyone's safety. And on this call, again captured on audio, we hear him speaking in rapid Spanish. Now we had this translated. We brought in a certified translator because I wanted to know exactly what was said. And according to the translation provided to this court, Mr. Salazar Ortega said, "They're arresting me." "Yes, the police. I need you to call Carlos. Tell him to handle this. Tell him I said the cop's name is Patterson. Badge 47221. He read Officer Patterson's badge number into the phone. Think about that. While being arrested, he took the time to read the officer's badge number to whoever he was calling so they could handle this. So they could make this problem make Officer Patterson disappear just like he promised. Officer Patterson completed the arrest without incident, which is more than most people could do while being threatened. Mr. Salazar Ortega was transported to the county detention facility where he was processed. And here's an interesting detail from the booking report that I want everyone to hear. When asked for emergency contact information, he listed a phone number with a +52 country code, that's Mexico. And when asked about his occupation, he wrote investment consultant. Investment consultant. That's what we're calling it. Now, bail was set at $50,000, which is standard for this combination of charges. And do you know how long Mr. Salazar Ortega spent in custody? 47 minutes. 47 minutes from booking to release because someone, and we have the records right here, someone wired the full bail amount, not the 10% bond, the full $50,000 within the hour. Most people can't get a pizza delivered that fast, but Mr. Salazar Ortega had $50,000 wired to the county bail system before the ink was dry on his fingerprints. He walked out of that facility at 4:51 a.m., got into a black Mercedes G-Wagon that was waiting for him. We have security footage, and according to the parking citation he received 3 hours later, he went directly back to the Four Seasons where his Lamborghini had been impounded. The parking ticket, he got it because the G-Wagon was left in a fire lane with the engine running and no driver in sight. But that's a separate case. Now here's what really troubles me about this whole situation. After Mr. Salazar Ortega made bail, after he went back to his hotel suite, he didn't lay low. He didn't call a lawyer and start preparing his defense. He didn't reflect on his choices. No, he went on social media, Instagram specifically. His account, and I have screenshots that have been entered into evidence, his account, which has over 200,000 followers and shows picture after picture of private jets, luxury cars, bottles of champagne that cost more than some people make in a month, yachts, casinos. This account posted something that evening. It was a photo, a selfie actually, Mr. Salazar Ortega standing in front of a mirror in what appears to be his hotel suite. And the caption, I'm going to read this exactly as it was written. The caption said, "Small-town cops don't know who they're messing with. Mosquitoes get swatted. Is untouchable. Is above your pay grade. Gia Solar's empire. Mosquitoes get swatted." He compared Officer Patterson, a 16-year veteran of law enforcement, a man who puts his life on the line every single day, a father, a husband, a human being, to a mosquito that gets swatted. And he posted this publicly for 200,000 people to see, including presumably whoever he called that night, whoever Carlos is, whoever has the power to make people disappear. Do you understand the level of arrogance we're dealing with here? Do you understand what this tells me about this defendant's character, his values, his complete and utter lack of respect for our laws, our officers, our entire system of justice? He committed serious crimes. He was arrested, he made bail, and within 12 hours, he's on social media bragging about it and threatening the officer who had the audacity to hold him accountable. But wait, there's more. Because my investigator, and yes, I assigned an investigator to this case because something about it didn't sit right with me. My investigator did some digging into Mr. Salazar Ortega's background. Public records only. Completely legal and appropriate research. And here's what we found. Diego Alejandro Salazar Ortega is the youngest son of Ernesto Salazar Cruz, who, according to multiple international news sources and DEA intelligence reports that have been made public through various legal proceedings, is suspected of being a high-ranking member of the Galileo New Generation Cartel. Now, I want to be very clear here. Ernesto Salazar Cruz has never been convicted of any crimes related to cartel activity in the United States. He operates legitimate businesses. On paper, he's a successful entrepreneur with interests in real estate, agriculture, and import-export companies. But the allegations exist, the investigations exist, and the pattern of behavior, the threats, the money, the influence, the ability to make problems disappear. It all starts to make sense when you understand the family we're dealing with. And before Mr. Salazar Ortega's attorney, who I notice is here today, Mr. Richard Kensington from Kensington and Rothschild, one of the most expensive defense firms in the state. Before he stands up and objects that I'm prejudicing his client based on family connections, let me be crystal clear. I am not punishing this defendant for his father's alleged activities. I am punishing him for his own actions, for driving 104 miles per hour through a residential neighborhood, for threatening a police officer, for refusing to comply with lawful orders, for using his family's wealth and influence to mock our justice system on social media. These are his crimes, his choices, his consequences. But the family connection does tell me something important. It tells me that when Mr. Salazar Ortega said, "I make one call and you disappear," he wasn't exaggerating, he wasn't bluffing. He genuinely believes he has that power. And you know what? In certain places, in certain circumstances, he might be right. But not here, not in my courtroom, not in this country, not while I'm wearing this robe. Mr. Kensington stood up earlier today and tried to tell me that his client is a young man who made a mistake. A mistake. He's 26 years old, not 16. He's an adult who made a calculated decision to drive at lethal speeds through a residential area, who made calculated threats against a police officer, who made a calculated decision to flaunt his wealth and connections on social media while under active criminal charges. These aren't mistakes. These are choices. Choices that reveal character. Choices that show me exactly who this defendant is. And then Mr. Kensington tried to argue that the threatening language was taken out of context, that it was simply lost in translation, that my client's English isn't perfect, and he didn't mean to imply what Officer Patterson thought he implied. Really, his English seemed perfectly fine when he was posting on Instagram. His English seemed perfectly fine when he was reading Officer Patterson's badge number over the phone. His English seems perfectly fine right now as he stands there understanding every word I'm saying. No, counselor, this wasn't a translation issue. This was your client showing his true colors. I also heard Mr. Kensington argue that the speeding itself should be reduced because the radar gun might not have been properly calibrated, that the Lamborghini speedometer might read differently, that there were no other vehicles on the road, so the danger was minimal. Let me address that. First, the radar gun is calibrated every 6 months as required by law, and the calibration records are in evidence. Second, I don't care what the speedometer says when you're going 69 miles per hour over the posted limit. And third, and this is the one that really gets me, the argument that there were no other vehicles, so it was safe. Officer Patterson was on that road. The emergency crews from the earlier accident were in the area. Any one of them could have been crossing the street. Any one of them could have been killed. And beyond that, the absence of victims doesn't diminish the recklessness of the conduct. If I fire a gun into a crowded room and by some miracle the bullet doesn't hit anyone, I don't get to walk away and say no harm, no foul. The recklessness is the crime. But here's what really concerns me. What keeps me up at night thinking about this case, the intimidation, the threat, because that's not just about this one traffic stop. That's about the integrity of our entire system. If police officers can be threatened with impunity, if people with enough money and connections can scare law enforcement into looking the other way, then we don't have laws anymore. We have suggestions. We have a system where justice depends on your bank account and your last name, and I cannot allow that to happen, not while I'm on this bench. Officer Patterson could have let him go. When Mr. Salazar Ortega made that first threat when he said, "I make one call and you disappear," Officer Patterson could have thought about his wife and kids, thought about his career, thought about what it might mean to cross someone with that kind of power, and he could have said, "Slow down next time," and walked away. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have blamed him. But he didn't. He did his job. He held this defendant accountable even when it might have been easier, safer, smarter to let it slide. And you know what that makes? Makes Officer Patterson a hero, a real hero. Not the kind that makes movies or gets medals, but the kind that holds the line when it's hard, when it's scary, when it costs something. And now we come to the moment that brought us all here today. Because after all of this, after the arrest, after making bail, after the Instagram post, after my office started investigating deeper, Mr. Salazar Ortega had to appear in court for his arraignment. That was 2 weeks ago. Standard procedure. Come in, enter a plea, get a court date. Usually takes 10 minutes. But not with this defendant. Oh no. Because when I started reading the charges, when I got to the threatening a peace officer charge, Mr. Salazar Ortega interrupted me right there in open court, interrupted a sitting judge. And he said, and I will never forget these words as long as I live. He looked directly at me and said, "You are too poor to judge me. You are too poor to judge me. I've been called a lot of things in 40 years. I've been called unfair. I've been called too harsh. I've been called too lenient. I've had people curse at me. People threaten me. People question my intelligence, my integrity, my competence. But never, not once in 4 decades, has anyone had the audacity to suggest that my economic status disqualifies me from dispensing justice. As if justice is only legitimate when it comes from the wealthy. As if the law only applies when enforced by people who meet some minimum net worth requirement. Do you know what I did in that moment? I took a breath. I looked at this entitled, arrogant, dangerous young man standing before me, and I took a breath because I wanted to make sure that when I responded, when I sentenced him, it would be based on the facts and the law, not on my anger. And it would have been so easy to be angry, so easy to let that disrespect, that contempt, that absolute mockery of everything I've dedicated my life to let that drive my decision. But that's not who I am. That's not what this robe means. So I continued reading the charges. I asked for his plea. He said not guilty. Of course he did through his lawyer after that outburst. And I set a trial date, and I told him that I would see him back here today for sentencing on the charges he couldn't possibly fight because the evidence is overwhelming. And here we are. Now, before I announce the sentence, I want to talk to the young people who might be watching this, who might hear about this case. I want to talk about what real power is. Mr. Salazar Ortega thinks power comes from money, from connections, from family names and phone calls that make problems disappear. And in some twisted way, that is a kind of power. It's the power of fear and corruption and intimidation. But that's not real power. That's not sustainable power. That's not the kind of power that builds civilizations or protects communities or creates anything worth having. Real power is what Officer Patterson showed. The power to do the right thing when it's hard. The power to face down threats and intimidation and still enforce the law equally for everyone, rich or poor. Real power is what our founders understood when they created a system of justice that was supposed to be blind, where it doesn't matter if you're the son of a cartel boss or the son of a teacher, where your rights are the same, where your obligations are the same, where the consequences of your actions are the same. And I want to speak directly to the parents out there because at some level this is a failure of parenting. Somewhere along the way, Mr. Salazar Ortega's parents, whether through what they said or what they didn't say, through what they taught or what they failed to teach, they raised a young man who believes he is above the law, who believes that rules apply to other people, who believes that respect is something you can buy rather than something you earn. And that is a tragedy. That is a failure because I've seen the other side of this. I've seen parents who work 2 jobs, who struggle to pay rent, who can barely afford school supplies, and their kids come before me with more character, more integrity, more respect for others than this defendant will ever have. Money didn't make the difference. Values did, priorities did. Teaching your children that actions have consequences did. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the power that the people of this state have given me. Not the power of money or connections or threats. The power of law, the power that says we are a nation of rules, not men. And I'm going to make sure that Mr. Salazar Ortega understands that no matter who your father is, no matter how much money you have, no matter how many followers you have on Instagram, in this courtroom, in this country, you are not above the law. On the charge of reckless driving, I find you guilty. I am sentencing you to 6 months in the county jail. No work release, no house arrest, 6 months behind bars, where you can think about what it means to endanger innocent people's lives for the thrill of driving fast. On the charge of excessive speed, 69 miles over the posted limit, I am imposing the maximum fine of $2,500 and an additional 6 months in jail to run consecutively with the first sentence. That's 1 year total so far. On the charge of threatening a peace officer, this is the most serious one in my mind. Officer Patterson deserves to go home safely to his family. Every officer in this community deserves to do their job without fear of retaliation from criminals who think they're untouchable. I am sentencing you to an additional 2 years in state prison. That brings us to 3 years total. I am also suspending your driving privileges in this state for 10 years. You will not drive here. You will not operate a vehicle here. And if I ever hear that you've gotten behind the wheel in this state before those 10 years are up, I will personally make sure you serve every single day of the maximum sentence for driving on a suspended license. I am ordering you to pay $25,000 in restitution to Officer Patterson for the emotional distress of being threatened while performing his duties. I am ordering you to pay an additional $10,000 to cover the costs of this investigation, and I am ordering you to perform 500 hours of community service upon your release, working with at-risk youth in this community, teaching them, if you even can, about the importance of respecting law enforcement and following the law. And here's the part that I hope gets through to you, Mr. Salazar Ortega. I am making it a condition of your sentence that you write a letter. A personal handwritten letter to Officer Patterson, not an apology that your lawyer drafts, not some PR statement designed to make you look good. A real letter explaining what you've learned, how you've changed, and why his life matters. and that letter will be reviewed by this court before you are released. If I don't believe it's sincere, you will remain in custody until you can write something authentic. Furthermore, I am forwarding all the evidence in this case, including the translated phone calls, the Instagram posts, and the statements you made in open court, to the U.S. Attorney's Office and to the DEA for their review. Because threatening a law enforcement officer while invoking family connections to criminal organizations is not just a state crime, it may very well be a federal crime. And that is out of my hands now. That's between you and the federal government. You came into my courtroom and told me I was too poor to judge you. You're right about one thing. I'm not wealthy. I don't live in hotel suites or drive Lamborghinis or vacation on yachts. I drive a 15-year-old Honda Civic. I live in a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood. I shop at the same grocery stores as everyone else in this community. But you're wrong about the important part. I am not too poor to judge you. In fact, my lack of wealth makes me exactly the right person to judge you because I can't be bought. I can't be intimidated. I don't care about your money or your family name or your Instagram followers. All I care about is the law. And the law says you're guilty, and the law says you're going to prison. Balif, remand the defendant into custody. Court is adjourned.